You're listening to Being Built, where innovators and tech leaders share stories about how building product builds them along the way. I'm your host, Aaron Davis. You're listening to Being Built, where we speak with innovators and tech leaders about how building product and solutions builds you along the way. I'm Aaron Davis, your host. I'm here with Amanda Ekman. Hey, Amanda.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. I'm really glad you drove up here to record this whole thing in person.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So, what are you building?
What are we building?
I'm not much for small talk, you know? Like, what are you building?
Get right to it.
Right.
So, we have quite a few things on the horizon. Right now, so let me kind of backtrack a bit.
Yeah,
I work for Gravity Diagnostics.
Okay, cool.
So Gravity Diagnostics is a diagnostic laboratory. And about 8 months ago, they opted to spin off a branch called Gravity Plus, and
Okay.
it's focused on e-com. So we're moving into home test kits.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
So first two kits, we have our
I thought I had smart questions, but you're just coming
But no.
around and get answering them.
I gotcha. So COVID, we had a kit. Obviously, the biggest thing for diagnostics was COVID over the course of the last couple of years.
That's right.
And that really kind of skyrocketed Gravity.
Right.
And so because of that, unfortunately or fortunately, it allowed us to do some really cool things in the tech space.
Okay.
So we spun off Gravity Plus. I was asked to come over and lead part of the technology, and digital transformation is my official title.
Okay.
I'm leading digital transformation.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of loaded sometimes when you say those words.
It can mean so many things.
It can.
Right.
And really what
You
it
helped
means
me with
is...
the digital transformation when we had
That's right.
some
Exactly.
analytics problems, right?
Exactly. I think ultimately it just means my job is really cool.
Yeah.
That's what
That's
I
right.
boil it down to.
It's tech stuff.
Exactly. So I was tasked with building out an e-commerce site and then patient portal to complement it.
Okay.
And it was really up to my design, right? There
Nice.
was nothing.
Kind of greenfield stuff,
Yes,
right?
very much so.
So does that mean your tech stack, your team,
Everything.
your design, the whole thing? Or
Yes.
did you have any limitations there? Constraints.
Budget was my
Okay.
only
Sure.
constraint. Yes.
Sure.
And I got really lucky. So the partner that we chose to go with,
Uh-huh.
Cumulus, it was the partner.
I've heard the name. Yeah.
Yeah, phenomenal developers, phenomenal infrastructure.
Okay.
So the way that our secure infrastructure is designed, it's FISMA moderate, so it's like one level below government security. So really great, strong, and HIPAA compliant.
Okay, nice.
And so they worked with me really well, had some really great teams, and we were able to do a lot within the budget that I was given, which doesn't really happen, I'm sure, as you know.
Right.
That's never really the experience.
Usually you're begging for the next dollar, trying
Exactly.
to justify it or whatever else.
Exactly. So we got the infrastructure put into place, which had already been put into place on the diagnostic side.
Okay.
So we've got the laboratory information system on the back end.
Mhm.
And when you're dealing with that much PHI so frequently, you've got to make sure that it's secure, right?
Yeah, security is a high priority.
Absolutely. And so we implemented the same thing on our end. We did keep both businesses under one tenant, which a lot of people find interesting for Microsoft.
Okay, why? Tell us about that.
So while we were operating as two entities,
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, the architectural standards have to come back to one, right?
Okay.
You're building with one standard in mind, and to build two completely separate pieces just didn't make sense. And then potentially at some point bring it back and have one development team own it.
Mm-hmm.
It's very cumbersome.
Okay.
So
you assume that same small team in-house is going to pick this product up after it's built.
You got it.
So that's interesting because I've been part of that. I worked in the services space for a while, building software for customers. And one of the things we did well in that shop was integrating with the customer's team, not just the tech, but then so you're kind of like you're paired with them, and then there's really no handoff. So is that a threat now, and how are you guys dealing with that?
So it's...
Sorry, I said I was going to ask the hard questions.
The hard questions, yeah. It's not a threat. I think we have built this team out, and we have this contracted team as well. We've all really become one unit.
That's cool.
But it's, there are limitations to what they can do, and there's also areas that we want to push this internal team to take on more.
Okay.
They can do it. They may not have the expertise to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So having that contracted team that can benefit you as well and essentially train them to be able to take it on and do that knowledge transfer, that's invaluable, right?
Yeah.
It's such a huge piece to this process and keeping us moving forward.
I think a lot of outsourcing misses that opportunity.
They do.
In integrating the teams, you don't just get access and good feelings and whatever else. You have continuity,
right?
So there should be no transition of ownership of this product,
right? It's not you and me; it's us. Let's build as one team, and that was part of why it was so important for me to keep this under one tenant. Was we had those standards established, and I wanted to make sure we didn't veer from them.
Okay.
Cumulus did put the infrastructure in place for the other side as well. So we knew that it was going to be identical as we went through that process. But building out this new code base was going to be very different. And so with this whiteboard, there were two of us internally that took on this project. Myself, and then I have a lead solution architect that I actually worked with in a previous life as a tech BA.
Okay, nice.
So she came with me to Gravity when I took the job with them originally.
Okay,
I was fortunate enough to snag her away, which...
When you're good at what you do, people follow you.
It's true. Well, and when you're good at what you do, people will pull you along.
Actually, it's probably more like when you're good at getting along with people. Because I think sometimes I see people follow, and I'm like, dang it, we got all three of you?
Again. It's true. The dynamic that she and I have works well together. Cool. But she's brilliant. So being able to have her on that team, I'm like, if there's going to be two of us that have to do this, we're the two. We can tackle this. We can tackle any mountain.
So you're 8 months into that now?
We're 8 months into the project. Okay. So we launched the e-com site.
Okay.
I think we encountered some challenges from a content perspective. So that's going to happen. Our product roadmap was a bit delayed. And so when you're looking at that, it's always going to, impact the content that you had originally put on the site. We were planning to be, 10 plus products deep on the site. And so the way that the e-com site was designed was less education, more come, purchase, register, right? The very clean user navigation.
Okay.
But it got more into the point of we have these two kits, and they're solid kits, especially pharmacogenetics.
Okay.
And we can get into what that exactly means.
I'm writing questions now. I'm just not much of a doctor.
So that kit it's so important to what it can mean for a person, but so many people just don't know what it is. So when we're trying to sell this kit, we needed the education on the site, especially when it's a standalone product with COVID.
Okay.
And so we had to make some decisions on, we have this phenomenal e-com site, but now we have to add some pieces to it. We need to be able to pivot a bit quicker. The application, it's a native application in Azure. So as you know, any type of content changes, they're not like this, right? So, it's not your typical marketing turnaround. So we did put on the front of that a Duda site.
Okay, I'm not familiar with it.
So Duda is like Wix or WordPress, right? So very simplistic. Have you ever used Unbounce to test landing pages?
No.
Okay, so for me, it's always just been, we've used it for landing pages.
Okay.
Is that if we go with this approach where the front end that they enter in are these landing pages with this information and this content, then it allows us to pivot very quickly on the content piece while maintaining all the data in the background.
Okay.
So we did that, and
that's just one of those lessons learned.
You're
kind of into it, and you realize, oh shoot, I wish we'd have thought of this.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
So we've got that in place right now. Still working through some challenges because obviously you're building in Azure, you're building in Duda. They don't look the same. You've got to keep design consistent, and that's going to be a challenge across the board.
Yeah.
But from a perspective of what the e-com site was built on, that's my baby. So I'm probably, just a little bit more proud of that than anything else. But the pieces that I'm truly proud of are the patient portal and the admin portal that were built onto that.
Can we take a little detour down that road then? So
absolutely.
Tell me about your user and who is your user and what is the product? And we don't have to spend forever on that because I know you're supporting other parts of your business, but I'm curious what's the impact to your customer for the system and the product that you're building. Right.
So the person that we're targeting right now I am our target market.
Okay, that helps.
Right. I am
that can be good and bad, I guess. You make too many assumptions.
Exactly.
Not a validation, but yeah.
So you're making a lot of decisions for the family, right? You are not the head of the household, but you are we find that these women between the ages of 30 and 45 are making a lot of decisions for the family. If they have a partner, it's a partner decision, but they're typically the ones that are going out and doing the research or making the purchase online.
Okay.
So that is who we're targeting at this point.
Okay.
Our kids are 18 and up.
So this is a consumer. This is not somebody who's in the healthcare insurance
system.
They
have no idea.
Yes. This is just somebody who's consuming news and media and doing their Christmas shopping and the whole bit.
Exactly.
You've got a profile.
Yes, we've got our profile. That's who we're targeting.
Okay.
But they don't have the information that they need. So we know we need to provide that to them.
Okay.
So that's where this content piece comes into it. And our whole goal is to get them, we're trying to change the reactive nature of people to healthcare and change it to proactive.
Okay.
right? So we will have other kits down the road if we're talking about, like STI or A1C, lipids, things where you're reacting to something, or you know that you have a family history of something, and so you're reacting to that.
Okay.
Typically, we go to the doctor because we don't feel well, right?
That's right.
We're trying to change that to say, how do you understand who you are better from your genetic makeup so that you can proactively attack your health? The first piece of that is this pharmacogenetic test.
Okay.
So what it does is it analyzes, I believe we have 27 different genes, and it analyzes those against 106 medications. And it's telling you how you metabolize those medications. So which one's going to be best for you? Okay. And those fall into 3 buckets that we focus on. So that's mental health, cardiovascular disease, and then pain management or medication management.
Okay. Interesting.
So when we're focused on those things, it's, are you put on... Let's go down the mental health road, because I think that's something that's very important to a lot of people.
Sure.
You get put on an anti-anxiety medication. It's not working. You feel like you're spinning out of control and you don't know what's going on. This is supposed to help. Well, it turns out that medication, you can't metabolize it based on your genetic makeup.
Okay.
And so...
where does that insight come from?
So that is actually the swab. You're actually swabbing your cheek and you're sending it back to our lab. Okay. And we're looking at your genetic makeup from that swab and analyzing these 27 genes.
Interesting. Okay, so that's what your kit is measuring.
That is what the kit is measuring.
Are you familiar with the research and data behind that? I don't want to go too far down that path if that's not your expertise.
I was going to say I would not do it justice like our chief science officer was.
Let's get that guy in here. I'll geek out on him.
Yes,
too.
You can totally. JP will.
Oh yeah, that'd be interesting.
Yes, absolutely. But he can take you through the entire science. We actually have a short piece of him speaking. I think it's on Instagram and TikTok right now on our channels. And
we'll link to it.
Yes. And he gives a little spiel about what this is, but he actually talks about the enzymes in your liver and how you're actually processing these medications.
Okay, interesting.
And goes into it a bit of the science, but it's complicated, but so interesting.
Yeah. We'll link to it, because that question came to my mind, might come to the listeners' minds, and so
absolutely. So part of what we were saying is, now we know who this person is. We're trying to drive them to this site to get them to be proactive about their health and proactive about the medications they're on. Then what's the next piece to that, right? Well, if you're going to deliver their results, what are you going to do? Email it to them? That's puts you at such risk for a HIPAA violation.
Right.
So we need a portal that they can come into, but that portal has to be sophisticated enough that it presents the information to them that allows them to look at it, understand it, and then gives them the mechanism to take it the step further and say, what the heck did I just read?
And I got to throw the and in there. And easy enough that anybody can use it.
Exactly.
Since you're not targeting a sophisticated user or necessarily a technically savvy user, right? So
exactly. Okay. And so with that in mind,
similarly simple to email or social media.
Right. So you're creating your account. When you register your kit, it has you create an account with us. We use ID.me. I don't know if you're familiar with the technology, but it's multi-factor authentication.
Sure.
And the reason we chose that one is because right now they've partnered with like IRS and a lot of other organizations, the VA. Okay. So a large number.
So the government's done some training for you already.
They have, but a large portion of the population actually has these accounts already.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it's something they're familiar with and they trust it. So we put that into place. You create your account. We know it's you. This is you creating this. This is you coming back for your results. And if you give your information to someone else, I can't help you. But it's the best that I can do to protect your health information.
Yeah, that gives them every opportunity to secure it.
Exactly. So then you go into your portal and your results will populate there. So they'll show in a chart and you can actually see the results as how do you metabolize the medication? What does it look like? But then there's a downloadable PDF as well. And you can download the PDF and it has additional information on it. So it's giving you that next step of what can you do? And really what we're trying to do is say, go have this conversation with your physician, but have an informed conversation.
Right. So you're kind of prompting things, right?
We are. We're trying to encourage that push forward. And it's, we consistently are saying it's your health, own it.
Right.
But how do you give someone the tools to own their health? Well, you've got to give them the technology to be able to have all of this at their fingertips to then go in and show the doctor, like, here it is. Here's what I've got. Now let's have this conversation about what we do.
Just from my own experience, that's so hard, right?
It is.
Like having to go in to get health issues addressed and to how much research do I do to kind of balance between being obnoxious and distracting and sending this physician down a wild goose chase or whatever of answers to, versus, I've got a hunch about this particular thing because of something I've experienced, and that resonated with me. So I looked into that, and that resonated with me. And so that's always tricky. But I'm of the mind that here's how I assess the quality of the healthcare I'm getting. Like the longer the doctor is in the room with me, I feel like the better care I'm getting. Right. That's the most knowledgeable person who's going to attend to my care. So the more informed I am, the more likely we're going to have an involved conversation.
Exactly. And to that, not everyone can come in and sit in a doctor's office for 30 minutes, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say you have 30 minutes in between meetings. Well, you can't take that up with driving back and forth. And I think that's where the power of telehealth comes in. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the major components that we've built into what we're doing is we give you the option to schedule a telehealth visit to then have that conversation and follow up and discuss your results with a genetic counselor before you ever talk to your physician.
Are you guys involved in building out that network of counselors? Is that part of your organization or is it a partner?
We have a partner at this point in time.
Yeah, nice.
Yes. So it is a very complex process. The laws that are tied to telehealth right now are very interesting and far above my head in some regards.
And changing fast too, from what I understand. I know a couple of people in that space who came from the big insurance company.
Yes.
We have friends in common. So it's changing a lot. For some reason, I'm connected. I guess it's because of where I came from.
Yeah.
I'm connected to a bunch of healthcare leaders, tech healthcare leaders, or whatever, who are doing stuff in telehealth, a couple of them. And lots of curveballs coming at them.
There is. We're anticipating some large changes come April. I think that's the power to some of the partners that we have in this space is they're trying to stay ahead of it. Mm-hmm. But on that side of telehealth, it's complicated and it's not.
And that's 100% their business. It's a small augment to you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So tell me about your team and this partner you're working with and kind of how you got there. And you told me about your architect.
Yes.
So what's the rest of the
group
who's attacking it?
So we have the two of us. Then we have Cumulus team that we're working with. So there is a group of developers and they're broken into different pieces of this. So we have a team that's focused on the UI.
Okay.
And that was a heavy focus on what the e-com experience was going to look like, what our app's going to look like, the portal. And then we had a team that was solely focused on our API build. And as you can imagine, that API build was complex. Mm-hmm. So there were so many different pieces. And if you think about the partners that are part of this entire process.
Yeah, that's where my head went is what are you integrating with and what are all the dependencies that you're working through?
Yeah, so it's traditionally I was working with, prior to this, I was working, setting up VPN tunnels and we're exchanging HL7 messages and getting those orders into the system. So now we flip it and now we're going to switch to this API, which we'd already started to switch to an API model on the other side as well, because, it's 2022. So let's get away from VPN tunnels as much as possible, even though there's still value in that. But then we moved to this API and we needed to make sure that as we were building agnostic, right? Mm-hmm. So partners change, partners can walk away from you, you can walk away from a partner, and building specific to what they have puts you in a position that could be detrimental to you down the road, or it could put you in a really sticky situation when you're trying to pivot. Mm-hmm. So the team was great. They looked through. The first thing that we had to do was really define all of our data points. It had not been done, right? We're a brand new business. We had not truly gone through that exercise. So we sat down and went through the buckets of data that we had, the individual data points. How are we going to group these? How are we going to store this data? What's it going to look like? We have a data lake where all this raw data is coming into. When we start to talk about that relational database, what do these structures look like? Building out the schema, which was a super fun exercise for our architect. She really enjoyed that. But it was, when you're establishing something from scratch and you get to define it, it's exciting, but at the same time, it can be a bit overwhelming. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so having some of those expertise from this partner were wonderful. It was really great because there were some areas we could say, I think that this is what we wanted to do, but I need to leverage your experience in this. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the power that we found in having this consulting partner that came in to help us and contracted in to do some of the work.
That's good. So you've got between the consulting partner, internal folks, how many folks do you have working on this project? It's a product, I guess. It's going to live for a long time, right? So
I hope that it lives for many years to come.
More than just a year-long project. But.
Absolutely. So there's the two of us internally. Mm-hmm. We do have the manager, our software manager on the diagnostic side. We
Okay.
have included him and our VP of IT on the other side.
Okay,
So
nice.
he's my partner and we work like this.
Yeah.
I actually truly love having him as a partner.
Hmm.
So the two of them are involved. So we're talking four to five internal.
Do you serve as like product owner, or who's
I'm
the
the product owner.
who's the user experience
Yeah.
avatar, if you will?
Yes, I would be your product
That's
owner.
good.
Yes.
So yeah, so that kind of takes me down another, thinking about UX. How are you? And I apologize if these are hard questions, but if they are, it's good for us, right?
That's good.
So
It's fine. It won't be a question that I
I
haven't
haven't
asked
stumped
during
you
this.
yet. That's exactly
Yeah.
right. So what kind of things do you do to validate your assumptions about the user experience? And so, you
That's a great
had a
question.
little bit of a marketing background, right? So
Yeah.
you've spent a lot of time thinking about your users and stuff like that. So just the reason, because I've run into myself feeling really close to that user, and then I was off by 30%.
Yeah.
Because I'm a unique data point, not data, right?
Right.
So,
Exactly. We did do some market research up front.
okay.
And so there was that piece of it. But I mean, as with anything, you have to do A/B testing.
Yeah.
So you can assume what's going to work based on the conversations that you've had, or if you hold a round table and 10 people give you their opinion, that's 10 people's opinions, right?
That's right.
So yes, it's varied and you're going to have different ways to look at it, but you don't know what works until you put it into the market and you try to put it in front of millions of people instead of 10.
That's right. How's that going now? You've got the e-commerce up. Are you getting good feedback from those experiences?
We do.
Support and problems and opinions and stuff like that.
We do. We have isolated. We've had some challenges. It's as with anything, you're going to face challenges, and you isolate where you think that you've got the most phenomenal requirement. Our requirement was 75 pages long, and you look at that and pat yourself on the back, and you're like, "Oh my God, it's beautiful."
Right.
But at the end of the day, you execute on that. There's still going to be a gap, and there should be. You can't know everything.
Right.
So I think the
sidewalk, you pave it this way, and then somebody walks across.
They walk this way. Exactly. And I think it was mainly customer services where we found a lot of the areas that we had to improve.
Okay.
And it was, how do they use the system? So we designed, in addition to the patient portal, we designed an admin portal on the back. And it's robust. It has a dashboard that we can track sales and we can run reports. Beautiful. I love it. It's like makes my heart sing every time I look at it. I check it every morning. Like it's my happy place. But with that, it's who else is going to use that, right?
Okay.
And we knew that it needed to evolve. We knew that it needed to grow, and we needed to build it out further. When we start to look at these pieces, it's how far do you take that build?
Yeah.
All right. So do we build the CRM into the admin portal, or do we integrate it with a CRM? Do we build marketing pieces into it, or do we integrate it with marketing tools? And it becomes difficult because
as you just manually enter,
or do you just, oh God,
you just write it on the whiteboard,
put it in an Excel sheet.
So you already took 2 steps I would have taken.
Right.
Are you sure it's not just Excel?
Oh God, I talk to my team. The bad words in my team are pivot table.
Yeah.
It's so many people live by the pivot table, and I get it. It can be helpful, and we're talking about a manual process as we transition right now a certain piece of the technology, and it's like it makes me cringe, but it's necessary.
Have you heard that joke, or should I spend 6 minutes entering this manually, or should I spend 6 days failing to automate this?
So
right?
True.
I mean, like
it's
how many
so
times
true.
have we done even just building a pivot table? Like I could have written this down on paper like 1,000 times by now.
Exactly.
Anyway,
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Sometimes the smartest, I guess, the punchline or the moral of that story is sometimes the smartest software investment you make is making no software.
Yes.
Right. And we tend to build because we can. That's an easy trap to fall into, especially when you spend your days with smart people who have all of these tools, right? Everything's a nail, right?
Yes.
So like, oh yeah, we'll write this and we'll do that.
It's true. Everybody has a tool. We had a conversation on my way over here, and we're talking about warehouse management systems versus an inventory management system. Right. So there's just these little nuances in it. All of a sudden it becomes a WMS because you need to track 10 more things than you did in that.
Fields or something, right?
Exactly. And then it's so much more money and more licensing. And our lead developer brought up a great point. He was like, I'm really confused why we can't just do this in Excel for right now and get this off
Yeah.
Like, let's just do it. Let's get it live. And no one
I like him already.
Exactly. And it was, I said, I'm 100% aligned. You're right. Let's do it. We have to get out of our own way sometimes.
Yeah. I have a strong bias for whoever says we don't need to do that.
Yeah.
And that's weird. I'm not very technical. So, like, I also am close enough to product to know that sometimes that voice is the one who's being lazy and taking shortcuts and building kind of a mess.
True.
Right. And to being able to discern the person who's thinking, who's forward thinking, and making sure that you don't create that for yourself in the future versus the person who's just automating something because they can.
Yeah.
Or, integrating something because they can. And it really just, it's not worth the effort. Right.
I agree.
That's a tricky balance there. And I think maybe some of the most important decisions that are made in software.
It is. I find myself fortunate that I have logical people that they'll tell me to dial back. And then when I tell them to dial back, they listen.
Yeah.
And so we all keep each other in check.
Yeah.
And it's a good working pattern, but we all do it at some point where it's like, we could think of what we could build and it would be so great.
Everybody's a visionary.
Everybody's a visionary. We ran into this with a CRM tool. And it was, so for our side, think about all of these tools that are out there for CRMs, but they won't sign a BAA and they're not HIPAA compliant. Well, I can't put any information in there, right? Automatically is off the table for me. And so I was sitting there thinking, do I build this into the portal while the project is in flight? And I was like, that just does not make sense for me. And so I pivoted and I found a tool, and there was one that existed in a system that we were already integrated with and already using for an additional like $10 a month.
Yeah.
And if I hadn't questioned myself and if I hadn't pushed us to that point, and I hadn't had this conversation,
another $500,000 down the drain or whatever.
100%. Right? It would have been additional build that we would have put into that. Now, don't get me wrong, the admin portal is set up to have a beautiful CRM. But
so who uses the admin portal? So
the Gravity team uses it.
Okay, so that's really internal to your organization.
It is.
Do you envision other channel marketers or partners of any sort?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So right now what we're focused on.
Am I like digging into like proprietary insider info or anything?
No,
okay.
No, I think you're good. The way that we're trying to set up now is to have our partners, anyone that we would partner with or anyone that would choose to go down a B2B relationship with us, right? They would have access to the admin portal. Now they would have access to a limited portion of that. Sure. So anything that's specific to their accounts, and everything would be de-identified, so nothing would be patient level for them to see unless an individual would consent to that. So we have to be very, very careful with that. Okay. But outside of that, those would be our main use cases for
that sheds a little light on your energy about the admin portal. That being part of your vision makes a lot of sense, because that could be an opportunity to multiply your customer base, right?
Exactly. And part of what we run into is everybody wants reporting, and they want enhanced reporting, and they have thoughts of how you could customize a report. And I've done it to vendor partners that we've got. Wouldn't it be great if I could have this field on here too? Well, I can send that to you in an Excel export, right? And that works for me. Send it to me. Like, then at least I get the report.
You know what I just realized? I still have a report that hits my inbox every Friday.
Yeah, two of them
with your name.
Yeah, there's two of them because it hits my inbox too.
That's funny. Thanks for that, by the way.
Yeah, I gotcha.
It's still useful.
Every Friday again, I'm like, oh, he's doing good.
Yeah.
So
we'll do a conversation about my business another time.
I'm very curious where you're headed with it.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is we're focused on helping customers build the teams they need to build cool product. That's it. I mean, I find the talent. So you can build the team, so you can build cool talent. Found my lane. I'm loving it. I'm kind of staying there.
Yeah.
That's how I'm going to spend 2023.
That's a good place to be.
Yeah, I like it. I like the people part of the tech business. So that's kind of my space.
That's good. That's very good. 2023 it's going to be a big year.
Yeah, I saw somebody today said something. I'm just going to repeat something I saw on the internet, I guess, but he articulated it well. And it was, it began as one of these long posts about, okay, here's what, breakdown of how this economy is going to work, whatever. And it said something to the effect of, here's what the talent market's going to look like in 2023. And then you expand, and it just said, it's still going to be really hard to find talent. And that's the truth. It
is.
And it's unfortunate. All these layoffs are hard. It creates a lot of transition, but most of those folks are going to be employed in
minutes,
days and weeks, right? Not months. They're not going to sit around. So
no, they won't.
It's still going to be a really hard to find. It's going to be a hard decade to find
For
good talent.
them, they can pivot quickly and they can go find something. On the flip side of that, someone that's in my position that will be looking
Yeah.
for developers, I'm in a harder position, right?
Yeah.
So yes, there's going to be more to pull from, but the cost is there too.
That's right.
And
The wages have gone way up in the last couple of years. It's crazy.
Yeah. But on the flip side of that, when you're looking at contracts or trying
Mhm.
to do something with a third party agency that comes
Mhm.
in, the hourly rate that you're going to find is going to be just as big.
Yeah.
So how do you pay for that skill set? Do you pay for it for
Painfully?
Exactly. Exactly. You take
That's
a
why you have
drink
to be
and you
very precise, and you have to know exactly what you need to get out of your effort. And you need to. That's kind of why I said the most important software you build is the software you don't build, right?
It's true.
Because you can't afford to build stuff that you throw away. That's how the software industry. I wonder how many lines of code have been written and thrown away and never used, right? As a ratio of lines of code that have been deployed and used. And I would say it's a high percentage, right?
Yeah.
And I hope as an industry we're getting better at that.
Yeah.
As a vertical in general, but the organizations who are best at that are the ones who are going to win, because you can't fight the war on talent. That's kind of a dumb idea anyway.
Yeah.
Who are you warring with? It's weird to me.
Right. Well, I would second that. Who are you warring with?
You're not warring with anybody.
No.
This is what it costs now to get this stuff done. So can we not do more of it than we actually need to do? That's how you win.
Right.
Don't build stuff you don't need to build.
No.
That's so expensive.
Right. Or don't white label something you don't need to white label. I feel like we've all been there at least one time or two.
Let me ask you about Gravity. Okay, so sure. Like Gravity, the whole world suffering from COVID and shutdowns, and do I have this or do I not have this? Am I infected? Am I not? Blah blah blah. Right? And Gravity benefited from that. It's unfortunate that these are the circumstances, but there are such things as surgeons and divorce lawyers and Gravity, right? Like people's pain and those problems you were able to address. And that's really cool that you were right in time, right, as an organization. So the question in my mind is, how did you pivot, and how is the pivot going, right?
I think it's because
the demand, the volume is obviously very different now than it was.
Very different. 2 years ago, so. There are, and I think you'll see this over the course of the next 1 to 3 years, there's a lot of organizations that have not planned for the pivot. And so it's going to hit them a lot harder. And I think one of the benefits that Gravity had is they were a toxicology lab before COVID hit.
Sure.
So everything that they were focused on before that, it was not COVID. It was not a primary focus on infectious disease. And so there was this base and this cornerstone that they can build on. We've got a phenomenal sales team.
Okay.
And they are very focused and they're very good at what they do in the space that they're in.
Nice.
The pivot it's not easy. Mm-hmm. And I think that anybody that tells you that it is easy and that it's a piece of cake and we're just going to go into this, they're lying. Right, to make you feel better about it. It's a challenge and it's a hill that you have to climb. I find myself incredibly fortunate that I'm at an organization like Gravity because they acknowledge the challenge head on. We are eyes wide open. We sit down as a leadership team and a senior leadership team. And that means the CEO sitting down at the table with us telling us, here's what this looks like for the next.
What's her name?
Julie Brazil is our COO. And then Tony Remington's our CEO.
Maybe it's Julie on that.
Julie's part of the chamber down in Northern Kentucky.
That could be confusing. I'm not great with names.
We have a lot of people that are out in the organization too that attend a lot of different things. So you may have met someone that's part of our senior staff. Mm-hmm. Tony and Julie they're very passionate about where we take this next. Yeah. They're very plugged into the team. So we're a company of 400, just over 400. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't feel big, but it feels big when they were a company of 30 prior to that.
Yeah, the pace of growth is
massive.
Huge. So obviously that drives you, that creates a lot of momentum pulling you kind of towards solving this COVID problem, which is not the same problem it was 2 years ago, right? So,
right. And you have to be very intentional now with those resources. So, before it was massive teams. And I can remember in the height of COVID, I was standing next to our CEO in the drive-through working. That is who Gravity is.
Wow.
That's what we do. When we built our first app that we rolled out to automate the process going through the drive-through, I rolled it out. My team and I went down and we were in the drive-through in our gear.
Yeah, what an experience, huh?
Incredible experience to just be part of that and to truly be helping people. And I think that's one of the benefits that Gravity has is their focus has always been on the individual that we're testing.
Yeah.
right? And that's when we were building technology, we're building for that. So when I'm talking before about the multi-factor authentication, and it sounds fancy and all this thing, but the main focus that we always have is how do we protect those individuals?
Yeah.
Right? They're coming to us because they trust us. Organizations have partnered with us because they trust us. And we have a huge responsibility to maintain that as we go forward.
That patient being the center of what you do.
Absolutely.
Definitely creates some energy in the day-to-day life, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've worked in healthcare before, and I understand how, it's one thing. I've also spent time working in, investments and whatever else. And it's like when you're trying to help this rich guy, it's just not quite the same as it is when you're focused on helping somebody, face a life-threatening or serious ailment, right? So
yeah,
that's good that you guys are tied into that, and it's good that you are as a tech leader, right?
Right,
like tied right into that patient experience, and
yes,
to the point of like running the operation, right? Running that patient-facing operation.
Exactly, and that's what I told my team was, how can I expect you to go out and train people, or how can I expect them to understand the technology that we're asking them to use and teach people to use if I'm not willing to go out there and do it with you?
Yeah, the closer you get, the better. Just about everything.
Yeah, and you have to understand, like, if somebody asks you a question and the challenges that they're facing when they're trying to download the app or create their account, getting that second hand is never going to be the same as talking directly to that person and seeing the frustration and understanding it and talking through that with them. It changes it.
And then look at us now having a conversation in the same room, right?
Exactly.
The world has changed, and that's good. You're aggressively facing the reality of that change, given the capabilities you've built, and you're trying to deploy them, working on deploying them in ways that are still useful and impacting that patient today.
Yes,
that's really cool. And I know that's a challenge. I've been in the staffing industry where I think I was a staffing rep during the Great Recession when I want to say 80% of my payroll, I had a bunch of contractors on billing in a consulting capacity, and like 80% of them were laid off in the span of a couple of months.
It's hard.
2-3 months. And so, wow, I had to take a breath. I was lucky I wasn't laid off, right? And I think because I was cheap, maybe I got to stick around. I don't know. But that was the beginning of a kind of a change in my career. And sometimes those challenging transitions or pivots define you. You know what I mean? When you stick it through, you stick it out and you kind of see it through. That can be a defining moment in a career and in the history of an organization. And I can think of a few. I won't bore you with the, business 101 or whatever, but we know organizations that have been through that transition where they were disrupted and they were almost shut down, and then they changed, and then here they are, right?
Yeah, and I think that the word disruption is exactly where it was, right? We went through this phase where it was all about the disruptive technologies and disrupting the norm and all of that, and I think we've now crossed that line into transformation.
Yeah, because it's really just one incremental change, right? Like, I disrupted the staffing industry 2 years ago. No, I didn't really. You know what I mean?
Right.
It was fun to talk about. But the reality is there was some transformation. There was incremental moves, and there still are.
Right.
And we're still doing some things. And every disruption you see was 10 years in the making.
Exactly. Right? So, and every disruption it is transformation. That's what we're doing. We're trying to take the next step and push us all into that next phase.
Yeah, it would be cool if you could just. Anyway, sometimes something just changes in a day, but usually it's not the case, right? You're facing what's there today, making a decision, and then you pivot.
Yeah.
We've talked about your team. We've talked about the product you're building.
Right.
We've talked about Gravity and where Gravity's going, and it's Gravity Diagnostics. And what's the new entity is?
So we have Gravity Diagnostics, and we have Gravity Plus.
Gravity Plus,
yeah. And I think they're going to maintain those names and how we operate. But as a team, so as a leadership team, we've always been one. We'll always be one.
Okay.
And that's how we approach it.
Entities, really the same team.
Right. So Mike is the VP of IT on the other side of it.
Okay.
He and I technically operate independently, but we're in lockstep every step of the way.
Right.
And I think as technology leaders, you have to. There's organizations that have a CIO and a CTO, right? They always have to be in lockstep, because if you're not, then you're going in divergent directions and your company's going to fail.
Right.
So I think that I'm fortunate that I have someone that I trust. I hope, that he would say the same thing about me. But we've been able to build something together that we can be really proud of. And then we can take this and say, I'm going to go build this and you're going to build this. And this is how we're going to bring it back together.
Yeah. So the question is, you went from 30 people to 400. An organization that hires 370 people in a year is not that outrageous if it's Walmart or Amazon,
Right.
right? But when you go from 30 to 400, that's crazy.
It
You're
is.
not even close to the organization you were. You got a couple of the same leaders,
Right.
maybe some similar mission and some continuity of your direction and your ideals. But in terms of personality
It's
and
different.
culture, it's a completely different set of
Yep.
people. You're leading things you weren't leading 2 years ago, right?
It's true.
So how's that? What happened? How has that affected things? And then where do you see it going?
So I will say we have the same set of core leaders that were always there.
Okay, do you?
And so our co-founders are the CEO and the COO.
Okay.
They've been there from the start. They've been through this. Our chief science officer, VP of R&D, and he wears many hats. He's our
Okay.
lab director. He's been there from the start, and he actually was the one that prompted us to test for COVID.
Nice. Okay.
Majority of that C-suite that we have that spans today
Mhm.
was there from the start of this.
Okay.
And I think that gives us legs, right?
Mhm.
They've been through it, and they've been through it together.
Right.
And so
And
I
that
think
probably shapes the continuity
it
of
does.
your kind of like mission and vision.
It does. And it builds that trust amongst them, and then that filters down.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean that you never question, but I think I have been able to challenge up.
Mhm.
And it's because they build this culture of trust where you can challenge up.
Mhm.
When I first started, I worked for Mike.
Okay.
And he saw something in me, and he really mentored me into a position where when Gravity Plus pivoted off, he and I had a conversation. Like, I'm very loyal to Mike.
Mhm.
He has benefited my career, and I will always be grateful for that. But I think that's the culture that Gravity has allowed us to have, is that you put these people in positions to where when this individual becomes someone that can become your peer or works with you,
Yeah.
you celebrate it.
Yeah.
And it's such a cool thing to watch happen. And I sat down with Mike and I was like, I don't want you to be mad. I really do want to explore this. And there was never, he was like, this is awesome. Let's do
Mhm.
this.
Mhm.
And I think that's the great thing that they have created there. I was
Yeah.
able to take someone from that team and move them over here, and we're able to do the same thing. And so we celebrate everybody's wins.
One of the things I measure myself by as a leader is the number of people that I've kind of mentored or developed as leaders that I would feel comfortable working for.
Yeah.
And there's a handful. I don't think there's a ton. There's
Yeah.
a handful that I've mentored and helped develop and I've led that at some point I want to slow down or I want to go back to doing this or that or do something different. That I would be. And there's a couple people for whom that's actually happened. We've gone back and forth. We've had different business relationships
Yeah.
back and forth, and there's a kind of a mutual respect in terms of kind of leadership and capability. And so that's, I think, so the story you're telling about what your experience at Gravity kind of brings that value to mind.
Yeah.
The idea of building leaders that you're comfortable kind of seeing rise up to your level and even higher if needed, or whatever
yeah,
else.
soar.
And whatever your circumstances, whatever the need is, right?
Right.
Yeah, I can think of a few people a couple of leaders that have reported to me that I would be happy to report to at some point in the future. Everybody would love to never report to anybody, but maybe I would love to never report to anybody.
Right.
Did I say everybody? Maybe I'm not me.
Well, and I view that as well as, I would work for Emily someday if it ever came around to that. I respect her. I respect the way she thinks about things. And there are sometimes in meetings that I just take a step back and I won't say anything.
Yeah.
Because her opinion is valuable.
Mhm.
And what she's going to do for us may potentially be better than what the commentary that I would provide is.
Yeah.
And if you're not confident in building those teams and you don't, have enough confidence in yourself to step back and say, look at this person go, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Then there's something wrong. Maybe there's something broken. And Gravity allows us to do that. There's been a lot of promotions and a lot of moves up that ladder very quickly. And I think when you're in a pandemic, that happens, right?
Yeah.
You are moving so fast through things that you start to identify people that have strengths in different areas because they have to.
Yeah, it reminds me of that exercise you go through. Like somebody played this out in a work decision we were making recently where, okay, if that decision had to be made now, or if it had to be complete by Friday, what would you cut out?
Right.
And that exercise is healthy, I think, because it forces you to stack rank things.
It does.
Right. And so the same is true for people. Like if you need somebody to step up and do this now, who would it be?
Right.
And then you can't just forget and let them linger in a position where they're underutilized, right? Like as a leader, it forces you to think who could be more, right?
Right.
And I've suffered before from letting good talent linger in a job that wasn't as challenging as it could be, or wasn't as fulfilling as it could be for somebody, and then I've seen them leave, right?
Right.
Those are hard lessons.
Yeah. We had
Fortunately, I haven't let that happen a lot. I've learned a little bit.
You learn from it. We had a conversation as a leadership team about, when people leave, how do you handle that? We just got survey results back, right? So you're going through how do people
employee
feel?
Engagement stuff?
Employee engagement. How do people feel? What is the overall engagement versus disengagement? How do we fix where our gaps are? And I said, I should be mentoring, encouraging, training people and building them up to where they can leave at any point in time, but they don't want to. Right. And but when they do leave, they should leave on a positive note. They should be going to something that's huge and better. And then at some point that could turn into a partnership with our organization.
Yeah.
And if we approach it that way, then you're sending people out into the workforce, into other organizations that are going to benefit the overall, tech community is what we're building into. And that's how I always approach it is, I'm not going to keep Emily forever. If I could work with Emily forever, whether it be like she and I are partners and we do this, I would keep her forever. She's phenomenal.
Realistically.
But I can't.
Right? 30 years from now.
Exactly. Right. I can't. She's going to soar, and she should, and I should be excited for her. And when she goes and she gets that next role, I can look at her and be like, that's amazing. That was part of our journey together, and look at you and look at what you're doing. What can we do together? Yeah. Let's figure this out on the flip side of that. And I think that's where, we lose sight sometimes of them leaving is just, it's a good thing.
Yeah. Sometimes losing people is a good thing. That's what if they have to go elsewhere to take that next step.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing I've suffered before from growing good people is that now I got to pay them more.
It's true. It's true.
Damn it, now they're this good.
Right. I will tell you, my husband always says to me, he's like, remember what you're worth when you go into this conversation. Right? And I'm so willing to do things because I believe in the mission. I believe in the work. I believe in the technology. And I admittedly, I lose sight of the dollar.
Right.
It's not what drives me.
Yeah, you better believe though in the staffing world, I remind people of that.
Yes.
Because sometimes they'll hint to me that it's kind of a factor for them, and people are almost ashamed to say that I want to get paid what I'm worth.
Yep.
Particularly tech people who tend to be a little bit more meek. And I don't know if that's fair, but I find less egos in technical experts, to be honest.
Yeah.
Than in like the sales and recruiting people that I work amongst.
They'll always tell you what they're worth at times too.
Right. That's right. So in the more modest populations, they know, they hint, but they're usually kind of quiet about it. And I'd say, look, there's no shame in that.
Yeah. You're
doing yourself and your family. And it seems to help when I remind them that you're doing your family a disservice when you have not found what the market will pay for you. It doesn't mean you have to take it. You can balance all the values of both things, but it does make sense to figure it out.
It does. My husband said a very, very good thing to me. He was like, we have a 15-year-old daughter.
Okay.
And she's she's in high school. She's going to go into college, and she's observant. She's watching things. And he said, so you come back and you're willing to take less. What would you say to her?
Right. That's right.
I'm like,
it's a good perspective.
Well, he's like, you would be all over her.
Yeah.
It's like, so why wouldn't you do the same thing to yourself? And so then I have to flip that around and say, okay, when someone comes to me and they say, listen, here, based on my job title in the industry, here's what the new minimum is. I have to take that into consideration because they've had the guts and the confidence to come in and say, here's what I've done. Here's what the industry's paying.
I've always kind of liked the guideline that you pay people as much as you can afford to. And that way, whenever you say no, you're doing it because you really can't.
I just can't.
Right. And maybe that means they're better off elsewhere, and that's okay for them and for you.
Right.
But anyway, it is what it is.
I don't know
how we got down that rabbit hole.
It happens. Well, and if you're looking at bringing in contractors and bringing in third parties and you're looking at that price tag,
Yeah.
It's hard. And when you know what your limitations and your guardrails are, and you're looking at how do I operate within this, it's do I bring that person on full time or do I go with a full team for the same cost?
It would be fun to be a documentary where you're just building great things and the money never matters, but you're not. Right? We're not.
Oh,
we're not just a documentary.
Right.
Some story of stuff.
I would love
built.
it.
Generally speaking, it's being built because there's a financial interest somewhere.
It's true.
Right?
I have a drawer in my desk that is full of note cards. So I live and die by note cards. I love them. And that is where my thoughts land. Note cards and the fronts of envelopes. And they all go in there. And someday, to your point, wouldn't it be wonderful if somebody just wanted to fund it?
Yeah.
They want to fund my drawer. I can just go build
I'll
really
tell you
cool
from my
stuff.
Experience, that's going to be funded by you. You and your
Exactly.
family.
My family and I are going to fund the drawer.
Right.
Exactly. And someday it may turn into something.
What else do we? Anything else we didn't hit?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think we hit the tech stack. Do you want to know anything else about the technology?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I am curious because you said it was like you kind of had the open field, right? So what would you choose to build?
So
and why?
So the very first requirements, I think it's a great question. The very first requirements that were handed to me were from someone who's very marketing focused. And so the requirements were a WordPress website.
Okay.
That's where we were going. And I pushed the boundaries a bit there. We built this native application in Azure. It's secure. It's built in this amazing framework. It requires a bit more work. And I think that's in the tech world, sometimes we steer to look at my cool stuff and what it does. But we never communicate to the business side that there's an additional couple days that would require changes for the way it looks, the way it runs, the way it feels, right? And we learned that the hard way. So we built this application. It was not WordPress, which they're used to having marketing folks go in and they can just change a picture, change something real quick. And that's a hard jump to make. And so that's when we had to pivot to Duda and make those changes. But when we look at what we're positioned to do and where we can take this technology, it's kind of incredible, right? So a lot of the things that we're seeing Azure do right now and modifications they're making on the back end of the security is stuff that we have in place. So how cool is that to be positioned to where we're thinking about it already? And I attribute a lot of that to the Cumulus team. I can't take credit for that. They had a lot of forward thinking.
That's how I feel about taking credit for my wife. I remind myself, well, I chose her, so
right.
I'm the winner, right?
Exactly. Oh, and
no, you get to take credit.
I get to take a little credit, but
you're part of vetting and choosing and collaborating with those partners. So
exactly,
credit,
exactly, and that's what we've put together is really incredible, and the way we've positioned ourselves for the future, I feel, is really incredible. So we look at what's next and where do we go with this when we start talking about predictive medicine and how we can help you understand the future of your healthcare. And some of the stuff that we're going to be doing in the next year is kind of incredible.
Is there any big secrets to be revealed that we can break here first on the Being Built podcast?
We may have to wait until Q1 to come back and do a follow-up.
A revisit?
Okay. But I would say stay tuned for what we have for Q1.
Okay.
There's going to be some new things hitting. The second half of the year is going to be very exciting for Gravity.
Wow. Okay.
Very exciting. But I would say
I have multiple reasons to be excited about the winter ending.
Exactly. Right? See, there's so much ahead of us. From our perspective of when we're looking at where we go forward, Gravity Plus has so much ahead of them on the kit side of this. But I think that data is going to be king for us.
Yeah. What
we do with that, who we partner with, how we approach it, and how we do things for people with data it's going to be a huge driver for us in the future. Everybody has data
right now. It's the new gold, right?
It's the new gold. And no one, and I won't say no one, very few are using it to benefit the individual. A lot of it is used to benefit the payer, right? A lot of it's benefits the hospital, the provider. And we're fortunate to be in an organization that is very individual focused. And so if we can take that and shift it back to how we help the person, then I think that we're doing something that is meaningful, but it's going to be powerful for us in the future.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, I'm looking forward to that follow-up conversation.
I am as well.
End of the first quarter.
End of the first quarter.
Hopefully you can let all the secrets out of the bag.
That's right. Exactly.
Okay, cool. let's wrap it up. Thank you for being my guest. Thanks for listening to Being Built. And talk to you. Thanks for listening to Being Built. I'm Aaron Davis, your host and the founder of Reckless Tech. Contact us to find the talent that you need to build a winning team.